Meeting to order. Would you please stand and salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Welcome to the meeting. Hey there. First thing on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting.
I make a motion, we approve the minutes from last meeting.
I'll second that.
So a motion by Ken, second by Chris to approve the minutes of October 6th. All those in favor? Thank you. Next are department reports. And Chief Mulharen.
I just
Oh,
let
he's
him
just
in, so
starting.
he's probably just, his video is probably just coming out.
It's buffering right now.
Let me give the fire department report. Well,
Yeah, you have one.
yes, just briefly, Dan is on the road tonight and asked me to let the public know that on Halloween night, the fire department will be giving out candy from 4 to 8 p.m. down on Main Street. And there will be a ham dinner takeout on November 13th from 5 to 7. And that people should look for the flyers soon. They'll be posted. Kevin, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Here we go.
We're ready for your report.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know it was that quick. All right, let's see. I'm assuming you got my monthly report for September. We had 155 calls for service. Also 126 motor vehicle stops with 8 criminal summonses or arrests. We had 2 operating F suspension, 1 OUI, a violation of bail, drug possession, driving to endanger, and a speed 30 plus 98 and a 45. I did notice when I pulled that up today, last month, I didn't put in the calls to service. Last month we had 195 calls to service, so that would have been August is when we had that. And the only other thing that I have is drug take back is this Saturday from 10 to 2 at the transfer station down near Burley Shack. Are there any questions?
I have a question. I'll ask you since Dan's not here. How is our ambulance service looking? Are we doing okay with members with the vaccine mandate? Have we lost anybody for our ambulance service?
Honestly, I could not tell you. That would be something that John Davinsky would probably answer for you.
So can we find that out?
I'm sorry,
somehow?
was making sure people were admitted up there. What was your question?
What our ambulance service is looking like, if they've lost any members or because of the mandates
Oh,
for
okay.
EMTs and
I
first
listened-
responders.
I listened to, because I have a scanner, and I just got, when I was a police officer, I got in the habit. It seems normal that, you know, they're covering, all I hear is Monmouth and
Yeah.
Winthrop and,
Well, I'm just curious because of the reports of like Buckfield being down to 1 and things like that. I'd like to know how we're situated.
I'll reach out. I'll let you know what I find out.
Thank you.
I mean, I do know that they usually have at least 2 ambulances during the day because I hear them going to calls. And they usually have, like, for instance, they had a rollover in Mount Vernon, I think it was the other day, and they sent 2 out there. So
I saw that. I
Good.
saw them leaving the station when I was going to Winthrop, so.
I have a question. Kevin, I read in the Kennebec Journal just recently that they're doing some statewide increasing of tracking of driving under the influence of marijuana. or just marijuana related incidents. Is that something you're familiar with? And is that going to be a change for Monmouth procedures?
What that typically involves would be a DRE, a drug recognition expert.
Yeah.
I know when we've summoned a couple of people, or arrested a couple of people for drug impairment. But it's usually not marijuana. It's usually the harder drugs like heroin, cocaine, or something like that. The only other thing about that is sometimes it's difficult to get a DRE only because there aren't many around that they've either gotten it and not recertified, or, they usually either aren't on duty or, something like that. But we can usually find one. It may take a while because the whole process in itself is probably a 2-hour process.
Right. I know back in 2018, when we sort of finalized the legislation that created the adult use marijuana marketplace, there was a whole section of provisions we put in there to put some rails on, making sure that we were treating marijuana just like alcohol in terms of operating vehicles and being aware of public safety issues. So if you do hear more, can you let us know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a report?
I do, just a brief one. We do have an election coming up on November 2nd, though it's pretty quiet. You wouldn't know it. There's not a ton of signs around, surprisingly. The polling place will be at the Academy Gymnasium, and polls will be open from 8 to 8. The last day to vote absentee without a special reason is next Thursday, the 28th at close of business, so 5 o'clock next Thursday. Special exception is something like you end up with COVID. It's something you didn't know was going to happen. Your employer calls you out of town at the last minute and you can't be here on Tuesday to vote in person. But traditionally, the last day to vote is next Thursday at 5 o'clock. And we are encouraging anyone who's mailing absentee ballots to get them back as soon as they possibly can. And if they're not comfortable and they're able to do it, drop them in the ballot box outside the town office, because don't rely on the mail. We can't promise that it's going to be delivered on time. And finally, the sidewalk project on Maple Street is going to be starting soon. I've signed a change order with the current contractor who's doing the work on North Main and Beach. And I'm told that the North Main sidewalks came out really nice. I haven't been up there yet to look at them. We have some tree removal that we have to do down on North Main in order to make that project work. But MDOT has given us the go-ahead, and we're looking forward to getting started on that project. Weather permitting, we may be able to get that project finished before the end of December.
You mean tree removal on Maple,
Maple
you said
Street.
North Main.
Yeah.
Maple
Maple
Street
Street,
is where,
yeah.
I'm sorry, Maple Street's where the trees need to be removed.
So
Yeah.
my
Sorry.
maples, I am sorry to see those go, but I understand the reason for the sidewalk, but
That's all.
I would like to see new maples replanted.
That's a good idea.
Well, that'll be a project down the road after the sidewalks are done. We can talk about that.
well, luckily it's only one side of the road. The other side of the road still has some nice old maples on it. So,
Yep. Next thing is select board reports.
The Monmouth Lions will be also doing a Halloween trick or treat at the corner of Beach and Main, featuring full-size candy bars at the same time as the fire department, 4 to 8 p.m. And there will be an inflatable monster garden. Also, the Monmouth Lions are going to be doing Turkey on the Fly on Saturday, November the 20th at the Monmouth Fish and Game from 12 to 1:30. Pre-registration is required. Last year, we had 135 meals. Also, the Monmouth Lions in I believe it's the third weekend in February, we'll be doing our fourth annual chili chowder cook-off.
I've got one.
Yes.
Had a conversation with Kennebec County Commissioner regarding their ARPA funds. Apparently, they have a substantial amount. And with the current restrictions on what those ARPA funds are to be used for, they are interested in infrastructure projects that would involve a bunch of communities in Kennebec County. And so I had a chance to talk to Brian Tarbuck, who is the director of the Greater Augusta Water District, and they're the organization that we work with on our trunk line for disposing of sewer waste. And that trunk line is about 50 years old with a 50-year lifespan. And they are interested in making a proposal to the county that would benefit Monmouth as well as Winthrop, Manchester, and Augusta, parts of Hallowell, to do some work on the trunk line that would be on the tab of the county's ARPA funds, first of all, and secondly, would have a 50-year lifespan. And I suspect they might want to come make a presentation to us either next meeting or the meeting after, just to discuss whether we're interested in an expression of support, which would help them persuade the county officials to say, oh, here's a community-wide, county-wide project that fits nicely into the ARPA box.
Should be noted, part of the trunk line was replaced and renewed just a couple of years ago, up from roughly roughly from the beginning of the trunk line from the pumping station in Winthrop up through to and past Strucks Landscaping, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so that project, and there were 3 other projects that are also in the last 5 or 10 years, relate to parts of the line that are just wearing out at the end of their life. The entire system is of the same age, and so they're looking to use some of this ARPA money, one-time money, to make these upgrades that will obviously be long-lasting.
Good. Anyone else? No, okay. Thank you. Next is public comment. Anybody have a comment? Moving on. The next thing is approval of the municipal valuation return.
This is an annual item that you get from the assessor's agent, Donna Hayes, and she has provided a brief memo in your packet with several forms that are required that we submit to the state each year. And this needs to be approved by you as the Board of Assessors.
I make a motion to approve the municipal valuation return.
Second.
So it's a motion by Chris, second by Kent, to approve the municipal valuation return. All those in favor? Thank you. Next is an abatement request for map 26, lot 25-6.
Donna Hayes is recommending that the select board Board of Assessors grant this abatement because it was made, there was an error made on the account. The abatement would be for $39.48.
I make a motion to grant the abatement request for map 26 lot 25-6.
Second.
So the motion by Chris, a second by Kent, to approve the abatement request for map 26, lot 25-6. All those in favor? Thank you. Next is an abatement request for map 21, lot 64.
Donna is recommending that the board grant this abatement request because, again, an error was made on the account. The abatement would be for $131.60.
We grant the abatement request for map 21 lot 64.
I'll second that.
So the motion by a second by Chris to approve the abatement request for map 21 lot 64. All those in favor? And next is an abatement request for map 34 lot 37.
You have a letter that was written to the property owner. This is a case where the property owner is disputing the value of the property. Donna has provided you with extensive information in the packet. I guess they had an appraisal done and he doesn't agree with the town's assessment of the property, but Donna has gone all over it and she disagrees with his disagreement of the assessment and is recommending that you deny this request.
I always ask the same question. I presume that Donna uses the standard application of all to this one, this property, she does to everybody else. This property is being assessed on this exact same merits as all the others.
Donna is very well trained in what she does and she applies the same standards that she's supposed to apply to all properties.
Why would she not?
I just asked the question to make sure that people know that that's what she does.
In her briefing, it says that she applies it to all properties assessed with a base lot.
I understand that, but I want the public to know that because the person, once her application is denied, does get to appeal her valuation to the county commissioners if she so wishes. Or he.
I move that we decline the request for abatement for map 34 lot 37.
Second.
So it's a motion by Harold, second by Kent to approve not approve the abatement request for map 34 lot 37. All those in favor? Not approving. Thank you. Next is the approval of a public works director.
Thank you. So as you know, we have been looking to fill the Public Works Director position for some time now. A few weeks ago, I received an email with oh, Doug, did you want to make an announcement?
Well, I'm going to recuse myself.
Thank you. I received an email with a very professional resume and a very professionally written letter. And I did not know who this person was, but did not have public works background. So I reached out and asked if he'd ever operated any heavy equipment. And he emailed me back and told me about various pieces of equipment that he had operated. I took the resume to Lori Walker, who is our human resources and office manager, and presented it to her to ask her what she thought, as I usually do when we're interviewing. And Lori did know who the person was and recognized him as Doug Ludwig's son-in-law. At that point, Lori and I decided that Dan was definitely worth interviewing. And we got in touch with former Public Works Director Herb Whittier and current Public Works Director Keith Frost, because that has been the hiring team that we've been using on any Public Works Director interviews. But we made the decision that we were not going to inform Keith and Herb who Dan was related to, because we didn't want to color the process in any way. We went through the interview. Dan interviewed very well. And then after we were done, as we always do, we went around the room asking for comments. And Keith and Herb provided their comments first before Lori and I did. And then Lori informed Keith and Herb who Mr. Dutton was related to. And neither gentleman had an issue with that. I then checked our employee handbook to make sure that there wasn't any problem hiring someone who was related to a select board member. And our employee handbook talks specifically about a department head or a manager not supervising someone who's in their family directly. So there's nothing in there to relate to this particular case. Dan has been a former select board member in another community, and we had the conversation about who he reports to and who he doesn't report to. And he's very clear that the select board members go directly through the town manager to the department heads and not directly to the employees. And that he goes to the town manager and not to the select board directly. And that's the process. There was never any time during this process that Mr. Ludwig reached out to me or had any part of the process. It was after I did the reference checks that I reached out to Doug and asked him if he knew his son-in-law had applied, and then get a little bit of feedback from Doug as to the type of person that he was. You never know what a father-in-law is going to say about their son-in-law. I will say that his references were outstanding. They were all former or current police chiefs in neighboring municipalities. And one of the questions I always ask when I'm doing reference checks is, if you had a vacancy, would you hire him back? And every one of them said they were disappointed that he had called looking for a reference because they were hoping that he was calling looking for a job, and they would hire him back in a second. He is very familiar with public works budgets, having been on a select board and gone line by line. So pleased to have that. As you know, the public works director position is heavy on administration, as well as being able to be out on the road with the crew. And Dan is looking forward to getting his Class B license, which I told him he would have to get within 6 months, and he would be on a probationary period for the next 6 months, if hired and approved this evening. And Mr. Dutton is here this evening, as are Keith Frost and Lori Walker, who were part of the interview team.
Since you're running the meeting now, before there's a motion entertained, I have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask, if you don't mind.
Go right ahead, sir.
First, a comment, though. I mean, if I remember correctly, in previous times when we've been asked to approve a department head appointment or hire, we've had the opportunity to talk with that person in advance and gain some insight into their experience and personality and so forth like that. And we haven't had that opportunity at this particular time. So it's difficult for me to be asked to vote to approve someone that I don't believe I've ever spoken with. So I just start with that. So I just got a couple of quick questions with regard to experience that will help me determine what I should do. So does Dan?
Dan?
Yeah, does Dan have any managerial experience?
Well, Dan's here tonight for you to ask him directly any
Okay,
questions that you'd
Dan,
like
do
to
you
ask.
have managerial experience?
I have some managerial experience, yes.
Okay, in what
It mostly relates to law enforcement work and being in charge of shifts
Okay,
with other officers.
all right. And so also I would think that translates down to supervisory experience prior to having the managerial experience.
Correct. And
Okay, so you've run crews.
yes,
Okay. And we just heard Linda talk about the public works familiarity based on being a select person. And I would imagine, that were you a patrol officer?
I was.
Okay, so you worked with public works crews and for, whatever road conditions and that sort of thing.
Yes.
And my last question would be with regard to your educational focus. I don't need to know where you went to school and all that, but what your focus on study was.
My primary study was automotive technology.
Okay.
And I worked for a few years in the automotive field before getting the interest in law enforcement.
So you have some experience with heavy equipment,
I do.
maintenance and familiarity at least with it and
Yes.
so forth.
Yes.
Okay, good. My last area of concern Linda touched on. And that is the fact that, you know, you and Doug are related through Catherine and there is an expectation of confidentiality with regard to what select board members should be sharing with anyone, particularly with department heads and so forth, because there may be some inside information that, you know, really shouldn't, if it's going to come from anybody, should come from the manager, who's going to be somebody different in January.
God willing.
And by the same token, there should be an expectation that the inner workings of the department that you head up shouldn't be open, not that you can't ever have small talk type discussion but there's certain things I think you probably get my drift that are just would be out of bounds for home type discussion. So
I certainly understand what you're saying, respect those boundaries and obviously do not want to infringe upon them at any time. I know the proper channels to go to the extent that, to explain that, Doug didn't know I applied for the job until the day I applied. I didn't pre-discuss it with him. He didn't mention to me there was a public works opening. I came across it by myself. I talked to Kat about it. And I chose not to talk to Doug because I knew that there could be issues with the relationship we have, and I didn't want to start off with any tainting of the process at all. The day I applied, I let him know that I had applied, but
well, that's good to know because it's easy in a small town to at least have the appearance of a nepotism type situation. So I know Linda had mentioned that to me when I asked her about it, so I'm glad to hear that from you as well. Okay, my questions have been answered.
Any other questions or discussion?
Or motion?
I make a motion, we approve Daniel Dutton as Public Works Director.
I'll second.
Discussion, we should have discussion after the motion's second.
Any other discussion?
Well, I for one think it's totally inappropriate, and that's all I'm gonna say on the matter. He may be a perfectly nice gentleman, and he seems like a perfectly nice fellow, but I think it's inappropriate.
Ready to call for a vote, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, all in favor? All opposed? Okay, congratulations, welcome aboard.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would, it won't apply, hopefully, the time that Linda's still here, but I do, I want to make it known to the board that I do intend to make a motion next year that when we do department head appointments, not anything below department head, we don't need to approve or be involved in, that when we're doing department head appointments, that we should have the opportunity to sit with the person prior to being asked to vote on them, to approve them.
Great, thank you.
Call Doug
Correct.
back to the table.
You bet. There he is.
Yes, big weight off. Off of everybody.
Dan will be starting next Monday. And we'll get him all acclimated. We're looking forward to having you.
Thank
We'll
you.
get you sworn in. Thank you for joining us. Keith is looking forward to having someone sharing the load.
Thank you, Keith.
Oh, welcome.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Don't feel you have to stay,
You bet.
but you can if you want.
Kids are making chop suey.
Next is a work session, first on Economic Development Committee details.
All right, Reagan could not be here this evening. She is on the Augusta City Council and they are starting interviews this evening for city manager there. So she has provided some information in your packet that has also been shared with the public on the internet. Just basically going over what the mission of the Economic Development Committee should be, what the authorization is, what the membership would be. She's talking maybe not less than 5, but no more than 9 members, with everyone's term being 3 years staggered, as you would normally do. So if you're appointing everyone at the beginning, you're going to want to do 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year to start, and then you can get them all on a 3-year term after that. It should be a special focus committee, looking obviously at economic development for the town. There should be a chairperson, a vice chair. Her makeup that she is recommending is representatives from local government, businesses that are in town, including business owners who are not residents. And I know that the board talked about not stacking the committee too much with businesses, but it is important to have the business community represented on there. Nonprofit, historic arts groups, community members, and also a member of the select board would be a member of this group as well. And she's talking about a few of the various areas that might also be represented, sole proprietors, home-based businesses, businesses between 3 and 10 employees, businesses with more than 10 employees, agricultural businesses, historic organizations, and arts organizations. If we can get agreement, I think she's also recommending that a planning board member also be appointed to this committee, someone from the planning board, because obviously it all flows together. And especially when we've got planning board members who are working on the comprehensive plan gets into economic development. So if we can get the details worked out for this committee, I can put an advertisement out for members with just stating that you're looking for people representing the following sectors. Once we have those resumes or those applications in, and I would use the new application that I've sent you, then you will have an executive session to go over those resumes to decide who you would like to appoint to the board.
I like the mix that she's come up with. I think that's really important. So I'm happy with that. So are you going to do what, a Winthrop advertiser and
Probably the community
Facebook,
advertiser,
yeah,
the website,
yeah.
Facebook, for sure.
Mhm.
What does it, have we looked at being able to post digitally with the KJ? And if what the cost would be for that, or do they go solely print, or do we know?
My experience recently with newspapers is that if you do a hard copy, that they're also doing digital, but it's expensive.
Okay. All right, well, if we can avoid that, then that's
Yeah.
fine.
And the Country Courier is also, a periodical paper. I think it comes out once a week. So it's Turner Publishing and it's the Country Courier, and that hits everybody's mailbox in town too. So,
Okay. I hadn't heard of that. I'll look at
yeah, and they're good folks there. They do a lot of stuff.
So is everyone good with the makeup?
Yep, I think
Yes.
that's a great plan.
Yep, I think we should move forward
Okay.
with the plan. What do you need from us in order to do that?
What you just said, move forward.
There you go.
I'll put an ad together, we'll get it out, and I'll set a deadline for it. Plan on an executive session in a couple meetings, depends on, what we set for a deadline.
Yeah.
But it's important because, as everyone knows, the Economic Development Committee kind of went by the wayside when the School Reuse Committee took over. And it's really important now that we've got an economic development consultant on board to try to get this up and running.
Yeah.
And it will help her, and then she will help the committee as well. Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. And then the next item, I was asked to bring in the second company that had offered us a presentation for a solar array in town. And this evening we have, I believe it's Matt and Danny, both from Sundog Solar Energy. And they have been out with Keith today as well, looking at alternate sites. The board at the last meeting mentioned that you weren't thrilled with the idea of putting the array behind the salt pile. And to look at the transfer station and also to look at the pit. Also that you, we made you aware that there's no three-phase electricity at either of those two other locations. And you asked me to look into that to see how much that might cost. And I know that we had talked about rolling that cost into the upfront cost of having the array put in, but that will affect, what our savings is going to be for a while. I checked with CMP. They do not give estimates until they get the ball rolling on a project, but roughly it's about $45 a foot to run three-phase electricity. And I'm thinking, after talking to Keith, that the new recommendation is for the transfer station, but I will let Sun.
Actually, if I could interject, they're gonna be demoing this area back here. That gives you more than an acre. The project you're talking about doing is about an acre in size. After you add the support equipment, the buffer zones and the fencing, 33,000 square feet is just a little shy of an acre. So when you add all the other parts and pieces, it comes up to about an acre. There'd be more than an acre of land here. There's also more than an acre of land next to the town office. Both of those places have three-phase power right next to them.
And the reason we didn't look at those two sites is because several board members have said that they want to make sure that the public is not looking at the solar array every day as they drive
Well, I
by.
thought we were interested in reducing our carbon footprint. I think they'd be happy to look at it. I think they should be considered
Okay. Do you want to?
because there'll be a huge price difference.
Sundog do their presentation?
I just have a quick question for Keith. Did you determine where the three-phase terminates going to the transfer station?
Yeah, it just turns on the Berry Road.
Oh,
Right
okay.
there where the old bridge used to go.
Yep.
Right there.
Oh.
it's
That's pretty
300
close
feet.
too.
Goodness gracious.
So it's across the street from the
Yeah.
transfer station.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. Well, we'd have to go 300 feet to the gate to the
yeah,
transfer station, then in. It's closer than we thought.
yes, exactly. It's not Gray Mill Road, it's right
Right.
there at Berry Road.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. Yep.
All right, so that would be 13,500. 500.
I just did the same calculation.
And I'm over
That's
here
amazing.
doing math in my backwards way here.
So Dave Heckman would be proud of us, wouldn't he?
So I don't know who's going to do the presentation, Matt or Danny.
I can start. My name's Danny Piper. I'm one of the owners at Sundog Solar, and this is Matt Hamilton. He did a lot of the engineering work on the upfront design and did a lot of communicating with Linda up front, so. Yeah, so essentially we originally proposed the array, like you said, behind the salt pile over at the fairgrounds. Originally, that was one of the better locations in terms of the overall size and sun availability and access to three-phase power. So those are the main variables that we're working with. But, getting the feedback that this was probably a no-go, we looked further at the other sites. So we did do a preliminary design, which I can have you guys just pass around to each other just to get an idea visual. That's over at the transfer station. It seems like we can fit everything we need to fit to cover just about 100% of the load. It's a shy by
Yeah, it's about like 99.5% essentially
Yeah,
to cover the bill.
$300 in the first year, I think is what it was shy by. The one big thing at the transfer station that we're aware of is that the tree lines on either side of there's two fields, small field up front before the burn pile or the waste wood pile, and then on the other side, the larger field. So the tree line that is on either side of those fields it's going to cause significant shade in the morning and in the afternoon. So the idea of being able to cut into the tree line there a ways, maybe 20, 30 feet, would help a lot in terms of the shade. The overarching site is good. It faces pretty much due south. So the high majority of the day is out of the shade, but it's those kind of early and late hours of the day that are definitely gonna have a bit of an impact. And then something else we noticed today is just that the main power wires that come in from the road are gonna kind of be a constant shade against the array. It's a small amount of shade, but it's gonna exist, you know, so that will impact production, which matters a lot. So anyways, we think that that's a viable site. We think that either maybe the array needs to shrink up a little bit without any tree cutting, or if there's openness to tree cutting, then I think we can, you know, size it the way it is. And we also thought, we were looking at this just before the meeting, that we recall that the property line is a little wider up near the road in relationship to the field. So if there was more cutting up near the road, we could potentially get more panels up there in this design. It's a little more narrow there. So get more panels there and maybe get them off of the other side of the driveway.
I have that question for Keith. How much wooded area do we have within the property line for the transfer station that we could cut into?
Oh, geez, I don't know where the property line.
Yeah.
I thought you
That's that
had.
down.
We did an overlay of the
Probably 30,
property,
40 feet, I think.
like up front. It's
What was that, Dave?
The other side of the snowmobile trail.
Oh, okay. So potentially we could go 30 feet or so, which would give us good relief from that shade.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I think there's room to cut. It seemed like, from what I remember, there was, what, maybe like 100 feet of trees up on the road, tapering back down to
Yeah, it kind of goes in like that.
maybe 50 feet from the edge of
What's
the property.
the, Dave might know this one. What's the setback on a shoreline zone stream?
75 feet.
75 feet still. So
Yeah,
there's some trees, at least on this initial plan, where they're probably close
I see.
to that setback.
And there's a
Yeah, I'm not-
stream.
There's a
on-
stream.
On
Yeah,
the western
Oh,
side.
okay, yeah.
but that doesn't mean you can't reconfigure outside of the 75-foot thing.
And it also doesn't mean you can't ask for a variance
Right.
to shrink that 75 foot.
Yeah.
And if you need input on that, Dave's very familiar with that process.
Except variances are rarely granted for new construction, only existing construction in shoreline zone.
Well, it's true, but where it's a public project, not a residential construction, they might be more amiable to that.
Yeah,
It wouldn't hurt to ask.
yeah, I don't know that that's necessary. I think there's a way to,
Yeah.
to reconfigure the tree cutting if that's the way we go.
It would certainly be better than needing to necessarily go through a DEP application, you know?
Yeah.
I think it would streamline things a lot more, so.
Would tree cutting add to the expense, or is there value in the trees? that-
Yeah, I mean, so if we manage the tree cutting side of it under our wheelhouse, then it would add expense to the project. We didn't calculate any of that into
Yeah.
it, which would result in a higher cost of energy essentially.
Considering that fuel prices are astronomical and going up even more, and wood prices are going up even more, I would suggest that our own town crew accomplish any tree cutting should this project move forward and the voters approve it, and provide that wood to neighbors helping neighbors, for people who need firewood to heat their homes. There would be quite a few cord there that could be utilized for that.
I'm in agreement in that, you know, the towns in general have the resources to do tree removal like that. You know, if it is of interest to you guys to allow the Public Works Department to do that work, I think it costs less really for everyone in the.
I'm
So,
not inclined to go along with that just from a risk management perspective. I'd rather just contract somebody to come in and cut that for stumpage, or for a no-cost trade-off where we say, you can have all the wood and you cut it, you take it, don't pay us anything and call it even, or if they say, well, there's not enough, whoever, you look at the contractors, they say, there's really not enough wood here for me to even make back my expense, then ask them what they would want on top of that to be worthwhile. And then we avoid the risk of having a public works employee hurt. Because some of those trees are pretty large.
There's a couple pines there, but the rest of it's kind of,
Scraggly.
yeah, I don't think it's that valuable wood.
Okay.
Popple,
If Public Works wants to do it, that's great.
I mean, there's really no power lines there to worry about.
If Public Works wants to do it, it's great, saves us money.
Make sure you do that before we put the three-phase in.
Exactly.
I mean, I think it would be fine.
You might ask CNP too, and they'll consider it when they look at the job, if they want to bury the line.
They wouldn't, I don't think they would, because it's gonna come from the other side of the road. So they pretty much, my experience is they would go overhead with that and then come to a riser, service riser pole.
I've worked with CMP on dozens of projects like this, extending power and three-phase and underground services. If they were to do that, the cost would be about 5 times what it would be at putting it overhead.
So,
So
so it'd likely be an overhead line, I would think, coming into that property on the other side of the street.
so it seems like the transfer station is a feasible thing. We just need to come up with, we need to size it right.
How many square feet is that current proposal of solar panels?
I don't know if I know that number right offhand.
No, I don't think,
We
unless
can
it says
cer-
it directly on.
Wait, actually, that design over there would say what it has on it.
I knew where I was looking, but I'll let you.
Danny, there was some discussion among the board members at a previous meeting about the amount of solar that they would like to cover.
Yeah.
We had originally thought we might start at 100%, but I think that there's some thought about going higher than that, knowing that it's going to diminish over time.
Yeah,
So we talked about 110% as being a goal that was possible.
okay,
Just because over the course of years, we'll probably lose 15% or so.
Yeah.
Right? Is that pretty close? Or-
15%, yeah, I mean, that's probably about accurate. The panels are warranted to put out 80% of what they do on day one in year 25. So 20 years into it, 15+% is probably pretty accurate.
So that's why we figured if we could get to 110% halfway through the lifespan of the project, we'd be at somewhere above 90%.
And so is your experience that the cost of electricity to the town is pretty consistent year after year? Or has it ebbed and flowed, gone up and down, or?
Well, it's been pretty consistent, except that we've got a couple changes. So our lighting situation at Cumston Hall in the theater is being all changed over to LED. So that's going to lower their needs somewhat. This building just came online with 3 heat pumps in it.
Okay,
And the building next door, the brick part of it is going to be renovated. And most likely heat pumps are going to be put in there. So we're going to see some electric costs going up.
okay. So this, well, the design that let's see. The original design covered about 100%, is that right? Or
Yeah.
was it more?
It was just about 100%
Okay,
of the load for last year's bill, I believe, is what we used.
Yeah.
For the previous 12 months.
and so this design is just under 100%, but we're already a little pressed for square footage there, so that could get a little bit tricky.
Can we extend towards where the trailers are, Keith, without causing you a problem? Or-
So it's the trailers, you mean the park?
Yeah,
I was thinking about moving them anyway. They need to go. There's not enough room there now, but
well, that would be great if we could move them and then extend the field, the array, the necessary footage towards the
my only problem is we gotta make sure we have room for snow.
Mhm.
right.
And that would be on the burn pile side?
No,
The
on
other
the other
side?
side.
No,
Okay.
right.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think, overall, it seems like there's enough square footage here. Obviously, we need to not interrupt the operation, so I think cutting trees on that eastern side could yield two things, just one, more space for the array. So if we are gonna go bigger, maybe that's where the extra panels go. And then just the shade piece of it, which is pretty big in terms of, getting to the annual production number and not having to increase the size to overcome that, which increases cost, so.
Danny, if we had a problem with space on the ground, is it possible to supplement this array with solar panels on, say, like a roof on this building?
Not really under the same agreement. They'd be two different systems. And in terms of like a power purchase agreement, for our company, we really can't do much below 50 kW. It's tough to make the numbers work and be beneficial for everyone, so that might get tricky. Maybe if the array was split in half to two different sites, so then they're large enough to kind of yield two separate agreements, that's a possibility. It is inherently probably gonna be a little more expensive to do it like that because it's two services that way. But on that note, we did also look at the pit and we spent a bit of time over there. It's a little less desirable mainly because of the distance from three-phase. It's, probably more than double maybe not double, but it's close to double the distance, I guess. So that's an important variable from the cost perspective. We haven't really, we don't have a solid design for the pit at this point, so we haven't built the cost to it, but we did identify a couple of spots within the pit that seem viable. There would be a little bit of groundwork necessary there, which again, we talked about maybe the public works doing that just to, reduce that overall expense.
And what about security if it was located at the pit?
I mean, my experience, I've been doing this for about 12 years, and my experience is that security is not a big issue for most people. I've never really had anybody report to me vandalism to an array. It is an issue in other parts of the country, and but it's not an extreme issue. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure if, you guys would be worried if somebody came in there and, shot it up or something like that.
No, that's one thing in hunting season, for sure.
I have another question. I didn't think of it earlier, but what about the sand blowing? Would that sandblast it or?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Actually, that is I can answer that. That's a big issue in other places. As the glass on top of them gets pitted, it degrades the performance quicker.
Right.
I've read articles on it.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of experience with that in terms of, arrays that we've built having any issues with sand like that. But I imagine you're right, if it's a really windy spot and, it's like sandblasting, it's just, wearing that down over time.
I have a couple of questions. You guys initially are responsible for all the maintenance and upkeep, and if you keep the area for 25 years of disposal, correct?
Yes, yeah.
And if the town opts to buy the equipment after the initial 5-year period, then all that becomes the responsibility of the town, correct?
Right, yep. Yep.
And what's the
asset at that point?
Yeah, and what's the projected saving? I presume that there's no upfront cost for the town.
That's right, yeah.
All right, so what's the projected savings per year?
In year one, it was, I think, 4,000, almost $5,000, 4944 is the projected savings in year one. And then it's, it tracks down actually the next year and then up from there. Over 5,000 for the.
Presumably because electric rates are most likely going to increase.
Right. Historically, that's what's proven. I mean, it's we model usually about a 4.5% price increase annually.
And now, does that affect, since our electric bills are in two parts? Delivery and production.
Yeah.
Does that 5,000 only affect the production?
No, so with this, yes, that's a good question. I mean, so we base this design on bill tariff crediting. There's two pathways for compensation with getting credits from the utility. One is the traditional kilowatt hour crediting, and the other is bill tariff crediting, which has been around for about 2 years in the state. Bill tariff crediting allows for a monetary credit value that you can apply against any portion of the bill, including the demand portion of the bill. So for any of the commercial accounts or the medium general service accounts that you guys have, we'd be able to fully offset the monetary, cost of those accounts. Versus with traditional kilowatt hour crediting, with demand billing on medium general service accounts, we traditionally weren't able to offset the delivery side. You could only offset the energy side. So this will allow, this pathway will allow you to offset all portions of the electrical bills on all accounts.
No, go ahead.
I have a question.
I got a couple more.
Other than your standard, customer connection fee that you pay per month.
So I noticed in your proposal that you had included, which was different than the last proposal we heard, that you had included the town's usage for streetlights.
Right.
And that is as well included in the bill tariff
Crediting.
crediting
Yeah.
proposal.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
That's how we understand it. We
Yeah.
reached out. to
Yeah,
them about it.
CMP confirmed, I have it in writing, that it can be offset with,
Yeah.
with bill tariff credit, but it will not be offset with a kilowatt hour credit.
Gotcha.
Now, we don't have a lot of big commercial accounts, but the one that comes to mind is Compton Hall. And whenever the air chiller starts, that sets the demand for the month, the first time that it starts, that sets the demand for the month for the most part. And that can be substantial.
Right.
All right, now, let's say we put a primary cap or a secondary cap in there to take and intercept that demand charge and reduce it up front. How does that affect you?
I mean, it wouldn't affect us. It would affect you in that, it would lower the demand and ultimately save money, but you'd have to compare what's that capital expenditure to the demand savings to see.
Oh, I know, I've done them before. The payback is actually, the last one I did, the payback was 13 months on a
All right.
on
That's pretty
a
fast.
5,000 KVA cap.
Wow, that's really fast.
It's huge
That's huge. I mean,
because the demand factors are just tremendous.
demand management is a really valuable, industry, but it's also very challenging
Oh, yeah.
in terms of being able to reduce electrical consumption while not disturbing or disrupting the, performance of the building. So,
Not only that, it can also feed back into the power lines and affect other people. That's why I asked you the question. But I don't think that it would bother you, but the only difference would be is your offset credits would come and be applied against different things rather than the demand if we reduced it.
yeah, exactly. I mean, if the demand reduced there, that saves you money. But, I guess the balance of that is if you're producing 100 or 110%, you're leaving some value on the table those first couple of years, so it's.
Potentially.
Yeah.
I mean, we've.
Right, with the heat pumps and whatnot. I mean, that's certainly gonna add, quite a few kilowatt hours between 3 here and a couple more for the building, so.
Do you have another question? Do you have another?
I may think of one in a minute.
I got one. Can you tell us a little bit about the option to buy out, the timing of it, and what you're proposing with your initial plan, the 100% plan?
Yeah.
I mean, I understand if we scale up, we'll have to talk about what happens with the various prices, but
Yeah.
if we're at the 100% plan, tell us a little bit about that.
So yeah, I mean, basically.
And by the way, we're being recorded here, so you're on
It's all
record.
live, yeah.
Yeah, people at home are listening, so our speakers are right here. I'm told that the sound is fine, so you're okay.
Well, no problem. I'm used to that, so. But yeah, so basically, from IRS, rules, we need to maintain ownership for a minimum of 5 years, 5 full years. Which is why we generally suggest in starting in the year 7, so that we have a year to kind of transition that purchase. And so that's necessary from the investment standpoint in order to be able to gain ownership of the tax credit and the depreciation value. And then after that, it's, inside of our agreement, we're making it available to purchase. And in that 7th year, I can say pretty confidently, it's usually about 50% of the value of the upfront cost of the system. And the IRS, rules are really that with a power purchase agreement, you're really not supposed to have a predetermined purchase price. It's supposed to be based on fair market value. Otherwise, it's more like a leaseback agreement where you have a predetermined price that you're essentially leasing, and that kind of gets it gets a little bit into that arena when you start to look at predetermined prices, and that's risky basically from an investment standpoint. I understand the importance of that number in terms of, somebody making a decision on the overarching investment for the town and whether you would be working towards making a purchase in that 7th year or not,
So what's the upfront cost of an array this size approximately?
Well, the array that we originally quoted was just under 500,000. So I think, 50% of that was right around 246 grand. I think is
Right,
what it
well,
was.
250, whatever.
Yeah.
So, and what's the disposal cost?
The disposal cost would be,
Considering it's gonna go up a little, probably 3 or 4% every year.
right. I don't have that number nailed down in this moment. So we would have to get you that specific number, but I would imagine it would be, probably under $50,000.
And you anticipate that would be what, 40 years down the road, or how many years down the road do you anticipate it would need to be?
Well, so our agreement would be for, if we were owning it for the whole time, our agreement would be for 25 years. And then we have 2 5-year extensions as well available. So if the town decided they wanted to extend, so up to 35 years. And the array, the panels themselves, they really have a 40+ year lifespan to them. Again, in year 20, really with the panels we quoted here, year 27 is what they guarantee 80% of the panel production in year 27. So in year 35, we're probably still in the 70% range, I would imagine.
What about inverter replacement?
Inverter replacement is gonna happen. That is the heavy electronics of the system. It's really working the hardest, and it's so we usually model about in year 15 is when we would need to replace them. So like inside of our model, we reserve some dollars per year to go into an account to pay for inverter replacement down the road.
So you're actually targeting 30 years as the optimal lifespan, because that's when the inverters would be due to replace again.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, if 25 years is ideal for us in terms of a full economic lifespan on it. But the equipment again is still good, so it doesn't make sense to just take it down if it's operating well,
What's the warranty on the inverters?
The inverters come with a 12-year warranty on them. And I think we can extend it, but
I
for
think
some
it's-
additional dollars, I
Yeah.
don't know what the price is right offhand, but
That's not uncommon.
so. And then I guess the racking system has about a 20-year warranty to that as well. So everything has everything has a pretty long warranty to it.
Is it warranted against hail damage or tornado damage?
That would fall under insurance, I think if there's damage like that, it would be paid for by.
So we'd have to have an
insurance.
insurance policy, obviously, that covers it.
Yeah, if you guys purchase the array, you'd want to add it to your insurance policy. And
So I presume if we don't, you're gonna have it on your insurance
we
policy.
would, we have it under our general insurance policy, and then we have like by specific adders for each system that we own. So,
The other big question I would have would be if we were to take possession of it and buy it, what is the savings change? How does the savings change? If it was $6,000 when you own it, what do we get if we own it?
it's pretty significant, which is why we show this to people, because it's,
Because people have to make an informed decision. If it's only $6,000 or $7,000 a year, the return does not exceed the cost of buying it, operating it, maintaining it, and disposing of it.
yeah, right, I hear that. Well, so if you were to, let me see here, so like we'll use year 15, for example. We are projecting that for an annual cash flow savings, it'd be about $54.50. And that's without the town buying it. In year 15, if the town bought it in year 7, it'd be up to annual cash flow would be $55,470.
$55,000.
Right, so almost, more than 10 times as much.
And do you have
That's
data
because-
that backs that up?
Yeah, in our proposal, and this is from our original proposal, is that right?
In other words, other places that have done it both ways, that you can compare and show us that actually happens.
Well, I've been in business for 12 years and we've been doing power purchase agreements since 2017. So I have not seen a life cycle on one of these in my time.
Is there one in the state of Maine?
Yes.
Not that I'm aware of, one that has timed out in its life.
Well,
cycle.
one
I don't
that
know.
somebody has bought, let's say at year 7, and they're in year 10 or 12 or 15, where there's data that shows what the change is.
Yeah. Not within my company awareness. I'm sure maybe.
Town of Wells.
Other companies, yeah, there you go.
Well, I'd like to see that data, because data's,
Yeah, we can ask for it.
actual data is better than projections.
Agreed.
I've seen projections on tax bills and all kinds of things and production of electricity and all kinds of things that fell far short of what everybody predicted they were gonna be.
Right, yeah. And that's why we try to stay somewhat conservative with like our, rate increase amounts and things like that, on 1.5%, we try to stay more or less within a realm that seems appropriate to what has historically gone on.
So what's the cost of the inverter replacement?
Well, if we had to replace all of the inverters, well, per inverter, it's probably about $6,000 to $7,000 per inverter.
What size inverters?
These ones were 60 kW, right?
Yeah.
The 60 kW.
These, I'd be surprised if I could find a 60 kW inverter for $6,000.
Yeah, it's like 7, it's probably like $7,000 roughly. And there's multiple inverters though, I think.
I understand that. So you only lose part of your array if an inverter fails.
Yeah,
It's failover strategy.
I think we had 4
Yeah.
in the design.
Yeah,
Four of them,
So
so,
we're looking in year 15. That's why I'm just trying to, in my head, think about own versus continue with the agreement, because at somewhere between year 12 and year 15, we're looking at somewhere near $40,000 to replace the 4 inverters.
which we did not factor that into this cash flow savings. So that's important that you're thinking about it, as well as the cost of if you had Public Works doing anything. So that's an expense that, if you decided to do that, that's another expense that the town would be taking on in their wheelhouse. But basically, if we look at the big number, which is over, this is a 35-year model here. And without purchasing it, the grand cumulative savings is 190, almost 193,000. And with purchasing it, the grand savings is almost, well, it's 1.43 million.
And that includes the inverter replacements.
No.
It does not include that.
Okay, and
Yeah.
insurance.
Does not include any of the expenses of owning it at all.
Okay.
Or
Does it
disposing of it.
include,
Right,
Or
exactly, or
disposal.
disposing of it, which is probably $250,000.
I don't think so. It wouldn't be that much. I mean, it's, disposing of this size array. Again, the original install cost is probably 500,000, or a little less than that. So,
Well, considering inflation,
Disposal.
excuse me if I might, considering inflation, the inverters would probably be closer to 50,000 at year 15. And that's an inflation of only 3%, which we're actually quite a bit higher than that right now. And disposal costs, it wouldn't be hard to imagine that it'd be a minimum of 20% of the installed cost at year 25 or 30 and more at year 35.
yeah, I'm not sure where you're getting your numbers there, Tim, but I'm more curious. Yeah, because 7,000 doesn't turn into 50,000. Oh, you're talking about 4 inverters all.
Yes,
Okay, so 28 turns into 50.
yeah, at
In 15 years.
1.3%, at 1.03 times 15 years, it'll be around 50 grand.
Yeah,
It could be.
could be. I'm curious to compare.
so what? Go ahead. sir.
Yeah, I'm curious to understand the guts of the power purchasing agreement, so we can do an apples to apples comparison with your proposal and other proposals.
Yeah.
So can you tell us what the town is currently paying for electricity and what your proposal shows as a kilowatt hour price?
Yep. So our kilowatt hour price is 11 cents per kilowatt hour.
Okay,
Right now, the town is using,
I think their consumption is right around 200,000 kilowatt hours,
Yes.
but so, yeah, your bill right now, we approximated is roughly 40,000.
$40,200.
okay,
Your, but your consumption is down around
200,000 kilowatt hours. Yeah.
And the system is gonna generate closer to 317,000. So you might ask, how could that be? So the reason really is because of the bill tariff crediting pathway. A lot of your expenses in the lighting for the street lighting for the town.
gotcha.
You're paying a lot per kilowatt hour there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's costing the town about $10,000 a year.
yeah, it's quite a bit. In terms of your consumption versus the generation, in order to get to the same monetary value, we're generating more power than what the town's actually consuming. Because the way that the bill tariff credit works is the law says 100% of the electricity cost and 75% of the delivery cost.
Gotcha.
Is what the value of that bill tariff credit is. So combined, it's about 85% of whatever you pay per kilowatt hour, blended with, demand and or delivery and energy.
Okay,
So and in this case, because the town's actually paying per kilowatt hour a lot more for that street lighting, we're needing to generate a lot more kilowatt hours because I think we dialed in on that, and it's like, what, like something cents a kilowatt?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
the street lighting itself is
really high.
essentially, it levelizes to about 60 cents a kilowatt hour.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it's not,
Oh.
it's not charged by kilowatt hour, it's charged by the.
By the light.
The light.
Yeah, that includes maintenance and upkeep on the light fixtures, replacement, and the recent changeover from
I love CMP.
Yeah,
iridescent to LED lights.
So it sounds like
Your rental and your rental lights too.
sounds like the bill tariff is definitely the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only way that this investment would really do a lot for the town. I mean, if we didn't go that route and we went traditional kilowatt hour crediting, we would probably be looking at maybe
we need to cut the array size down a lot.
A lot.
You have to, we would meet the
More than
production
half,
to
I would
the
think.
consumption, yeah.
And it would be more than in half, because we wouldn't really be targeting at that point any of the medium general service accounts or even street lighting. We wouldn't be able to offset street lighting or medium general service. It could be potentially, there potentially is less expense, like if you had a building, which you guys don't exactly have one, or if there was a service that we could tie into that is existing at that point, then we could eliminate some expense there. But overall, I think if we look at that, if we model that out, it's we're gonna only be offsetting maybe 50% of the town's expense at that point, or less. I don't even know how many non-medium general.
Yeah, I think we briefly considered it and
Yeah,
it was like half, we would only be able to offset half the bill,
right.
so.
So
It's-
in when we pay per kilowatt hour on that portion of our bill, what is our current price?
Well, it's different on different accounts, but
Yeah, I know. I think there might be 10 accounts that have a
Yeah.
single rate, and then there's one that's got an industrial rate or different category.
Yeah,
It comes back.
Comes in Hall.
And it changes by demand.
right.
When you hit you hit certain demand levels, then your rate changes. So that's why I think the only way to consider this is with the bill tariff. So you can take into account all of those things and generate more than you use and get the credit for that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, under traditional kilowatt hour crediting, the credit value is actually a little higher because you're getting a 1-to-1 credit value versus a 1 to 0.85. Credit value. So it's a little bit higher, but again, the accounts that are using the most amount of power are the demand accounts, or the most amount of money demand, the street lights. So if we focus only on the other accounts that we can do the kilowatt hour crediting with, it just ends up being a much less attractive investment, I think, for the town, really,
Let me ask another question. I think a number of years ago, there was a bill passed in the legislature that allowed municipalities to own their own streetlights
Yeah.
and not have to rent them, and they could even mount them on CMP's poles.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And in that particular case, I believe they just pay the straight up KW consumption, not the rental. So the KW becomes, instead of 60 cents, roughly aggregated between the rental and the power users, it's whatever the prevailing rate is.
Yeah.
11, 12, 15, whatever it happens to be. Now, let's say something like that happens in the future. How would that affect the bill tariffing? How would it affect and change the ratio there?
I mean, it could be a lot, because if the town,
Because that would make a huge difference in the cost of streetlights.
yeah, which then all of a sudden it would make the array much larger than it needs to be, because if you reduced your own expense by purchasing the streetlights, and all of a sudden you're paying 15 cents a kilowatt hour instead of 60 cents a kilowatt hour for those lights, ballparks here. You would now have an array that is producing a lot more electricity than the town can use to offset. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. And what does that mean?
Means that you're leaving money on the table at that point. I mean,
Because they're only gonna pay
means that
you,
you're paying us, you're in an agreement with us to pay us still at the full, our agreement is that you pay for all of the power that gets generated. And then you have a separate agreement with the utility company to receive a credit for that generated power. And so the utility company is only gonna credit at whatever your spendings are.
So Tim, what happened to that bill?
pretty sure it passed.
I'm
I'm gonna
surprised.
check on it, but I'm
Should-
pretty sure it did pass. Because as I recall, there were a couple of towns east of here that changed over.
And I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
So using the net metering, our remaining bill, it looks like the first year is $305 and then it goes up a little bit. So essentially by using the net metering, we're not leaving the credits out there that we can't use. Because, if we aren't, you don't use them, you lose them essentially.
Right.
And CMP takes the energy that you produced and you
For
lose
free,
that. But
yeah.
by using this, we're using everything possible and not leaving money that
Well,
CMP keeps.
In either.
If I'm understanding this correctly,
Yeah.
looking at the proposal.
Yeah, that's a good question. No, I mean, so in either crediting pathway, bill tariff credit or traditional kilowatt hour credit, if you overproduce compared to what you consume,
Mhm.
you lose that credit value
Yes,
in
yes,
either pathway.
yes.
So if we build an array that's 110% of what you're using, you're losing 10%.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
If your load increases, if the array degrades over time, then that number, is less there. That's being left on the table and you're getting closer to matching that 100%.
And yet, when we try to determine the size of the array that's optimal for us, we ought to be thinking about what is likely to happen in the future. And what has just happened in the recent past, right? We just added heat pumps
Yeah.
here. We know heat pumps are coming
Yeah.
there. Are we looking at electric vehicles in the next 5 years, 10 years? Or are we going to continue with gasoline powered vehicles?
Right.
For town vehicles, municipal
Yeah.
vehicles.
Yeah, I always see our usage going up.
Well, and I was gonna say, as some of our furnaces are getting old, and we know Dennis has got some challenges that comes in.
Yeah.
And some of our smaller buildings may want to convert over to heat pumps.
Right. Yeah.
So, and in fact, some of that, you can design your plan. If you know that the cost of electricity for at least the next 5 years or maybe 25 is 11 cents a kilowatt hour, guaranteed, then you can design your plan so that those furnaces become something powered by electricity because it's locked in at 11% or 11 cents kilowatt hour.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of times, other towns will look at, this cash flow savings in the upfront years and put that right into an account, either to fund the purchase or potentially, put towards other
Sure.
activities.
So if at some point in the future, there's a magical bill that says, hey, we get free streetlights, and all of a sudden, a $40,000 bill becomes a $30,000 bill, then we can figure out what we need to do to not pay an oil bill or,
Yeah.
not pay a gasoline bill for municipal vehicles or a diesel bill or whatever, because you just plan your capital expenditures to be powered by electricity because it's super cheap. It's 11 cents a kilowatt hour.
It's not gonna be that way though, because when you get into everything that you're talking about for possible electric power usage, then in peak heating times, your rate is gonna go up because your demand is gonna spike. And once it hits that spike, wherever it stops at, that sets your price for that period. For
That
billing
30-day period, month or whatever.
Right, so the potential is that you say, all right, it's cost 11 cents and it's gonna cost, that's your base rate. But your peak demand could bring it significantly higher higher than that in peak heating seasons, if you're heating a lot with electricity, or in AC, if there's really hot summer. And like in Cumston, you have the theater lights and everything like that, so. And there's a lot that goes into that. Tim's very familiar with that from his years at the mill. I'm familiar with it to some extent from the plant operations where I'm located, and everything that we go through to limit our peak demand. So we have procedures on startup of machinery and so forth to limit that, because once you've set it, it's set for 30 days.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that is very accurate and true. The other thing though is that if you have a locked in set rate of electricity, it's not necessarily going to cost you more if increased demand, if you can offset that with the electricity.
Which is why we would need the bill tariff option to be able to leverage that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the most versatile. You can use that into the future against a changing, electrical relationship with the utility.
Right.
Keep using that on any portion of it.
I just have one more operational question. How is snow load handled?
So basically we will engineer it to be based on the snow load in Monmouth. So from the mounting system, we'll do a structural calculation to make sure that both wind and snow load aren't gonna, impact it.
What about snow impacting, how do you clear the panels from snow?
You really don't, you could, but it's not worth it. It's not, there's not enough gain in value to pay for that really.
So the theory is that the angle that you set the panels at, and then the ambient temperature of the internal temperature of the panels and everything keeps them pretty free of snow and ice.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's really, there's kind of three variables. It's the amount of sunlight at the array, the amount of wind exposure, and the pitch, so the angle of the array. So with this array, I think we modeled this at a 35 degree.
Yeah.
So 35 degrees is generally your best grid tied angle in Maine. You get the most energy production at that angle. It's also a pretty good angle for shedding snow. It's approaching the more shallow side, but it's still steep enough that when you do get enough sunlight that comes out after a storm, it starts to warm up the panel a little bit, and you get a little layer of water there, and it slides. So they'll clear. I mean, there's certain years that we've experienced where we might have more moisture in a storm. Like a higher moisture content, and then we get a hard freeze right after that. And then that condition usually will turn to ice on the array, and it doesn't slide as well. It takes a lot more heating up at that point for it to slide off easily. So we've had some winters where arrays have stayed covered a lot longer than other winters. And so in those years, there's lower production because of that. But we're also talking about the lowest production months out of the year. So the amount that you're leaving on the table there is pretty small compared to the annual.
And do you have that factored in as a weighted average in your calculations?
We do. We have a production report. We actually probably have a couple of them with all the software that we use, but I think we provided an NREL report, right?
Yeah, PV Plus and NREL should be in there.
Yeah, that's a piece of software that's put out by National Renewable Energy.
I looked that over and it looked like that you had done that.
Yeah, we put in, I don't know what the degradation factor was there, but we generally, like, there's a portion in there where we can input a bunch of factors to come up with a total percentage of degradation.
It looked to me like it was 0.03, if I remember right, something like that.
3% losses on snow specifically. That sounds about right.
Yeah. So.
Well, I will tell you, Monmouth has had anywhere from 40 to 140 inches of snow in the last 30 years. And I've got about 20 or 25 years of data and averages and whatnot for all that.
Wow. Yeah.
In the last few years, it's probably been averaging a little less, maybe around 60, 70 inches instead of the higher side. But it can be significant, especially if you get some, and the weight can be significant, especially when you get freezing rain after a snowstorm.
Right,
That would be tremendously heavy.
right, right. Yeah, and so, and, you know, when we do all those calculations, we basically are, you know, we're following all the state, you know, snow load guidelines and everything, so. We factor in whatever the, you know, historical snow load is here.
Can we circle back to the purchase
Yeah.
agreement? How then would you suggest that a price is agreed upon at the beginning of year 7? What's the process?
So, I mean, you know, the way the IRS looks at it is fair market value, you know, so an FMV evaluation. But that's can be expensive and it's not necessarily necessary if there's agreement on the price, you know what I mean? So I think that the caution that we've been, you know, given is that we, you know, setting that into the contract is kind of a no-no from an IRS standpoint. You know, but if it's not that we have to hire a fair market evaluator at that time, if there's agreement in, you know, in.
So the language then in the contract would read a 50% of fair market value that could be determined by an appraiser or somebody.
Yeah, and so maybe as a next step, I can share a contract with you guys so you can look at that. It's a contract that's put out by National Renewable Energy Lab. So it's kind of boilerplate from that standpoint.
And what would be the cost of, if we decided to go the route of an appraisal for fair market value, what would the cost of that be?
I honestly don't have a really solid number for you there.
Okay.
I would imagine it's going to be over 5 and probably under 10.
Okay.
Thousand, you know, and I think that, you know, so that's really it. I mean, the best, you know, what I have seen in some contracts in the past is language that talks about the greater of the two values, you know, which kind of leans towards, you're leaning towards the greater of the two values, you know, the FMV value or the price that has been discussed, you know. So but again, it's uncomfortable, and really it boils down to what the person most at risk, which is the investor in the project.
Sure.
So, but I have seen contracts both ways. I mean, we actually have some contracts that are written like that, and you know, there isn't a lot of concern there. So
We're all pretty comfortable that we've got a good first pass
I
on
have
these guys.
I have a couple questions. Installation wise, having talked with folks that are abutting the giant installation on the Ridge Road with the pounding of pile, how much do you anticipate that happen? I mean, obviously our array is tiny compared to that, but
yeah.
how much do you anticipate?
Oh, is there an array being built right now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Noisy.
A ginormous one. So, you know, it's been an issue, especially during the summer with having your windows open, and I live down in the valley below the ridge and I can hear it at my house.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, it's a big deal.
yeah, so obviously there's abutters, and my property abuts the dump on the, transfer station on the other side. I do dump my trash, so I dump it. So I know that people are gonna wanna know that question. And so what kind of sounds and construction are we dealing with there?
Yeah, so I mean, we would have some heavy equipment that we'd be operating. We'd have an excavator and some skid steers. We also have a rock drill. So if the racking system we proposed is utilizing ground screws for the foundations. So
Not
pile driven.
not piled.
Not
or
pile.
not concrete slabs.
Ballast blocks. No,
No.
they're ground screws. So they're
Interesting.
yeah. So
Almost like
kind of like
bars that that, techno post, that kind of,
Yeah,
Okay.
that's similar to that.
Yep.
And a techno metal post is a helical.
yes,
So it's got a wide
Yep.
disc on the end of it
Mhm.
versus the ground screw, literally looks like a screw with threads
Okay.
on it. It's usually a little longer and it's sharp on the end, so it kind of pierces things. And so that's what we'd be using. And basically, if we hit any ledge or rocks,
which you will.
we'd be drilling at that point. So. Pretty-
There's a lot of buried stuff there.
Well, there's a lot of buried
Might
stuff
hit
there.
an
You
old
might
tractor
run
or
it,
something.
but I
Not in the
mean,
area
knowing-
that you're talking about putting
exactly,
it.
but it
nothing
was always
there.
further back where the trash was.
Basically
further
from the
back.
compactor. back.
Yes, exactly, back. But knowing that what ledge, my mother had a well drilled this summer, not very far from there, and they
Yeah.
went 4 feet before they hit ledge. So,
Yeah.
knowing that, so that the noise factor is important. And also, obviously, I'd assume that you'd have some sort of chain link fencing or some sort of fencing that encloses the perimeter of this, that keeps people that are at the transfer station, or because riding a snowmobile, I don't believe that chain link fence goes into the woods. I mean, if you stop your snowmobile, you're inside the transfer station, right? Correct?
Right. So
That's what I thought, because I can snowshoe through there and use the snowmobile and all that. So people can come in from the backside. So security around that will be
Yeah.
important.
So we didn't factor in the cost of the chain link fence. We factored in the cost of fencing in the DC conductors on the backside of the array. For a code compliancy standpoint, we need to have the DC wiring fenced in, which is all of the wire
Yes,
panels
yes.
themselves.
That'd be the National Electric Code
This-
requirement.
The scary
That's right.
stuff that people could touch and hurt themselves with.
Exactly. So that's really the biggest liability there. From a standpoint of kind of enclosing it and just generally keeping people at bay, we could certainly look at factoring in a full fence around
Yeah.
everything. It's
How do you feel about that? Do you think that's important down there or
No,
no?
No, I think at a transfer station, like we have a couple different arrays at different transfer stations, and my observation is that they just are left alone. People are there to drop trash
Yes.
and go,
And,
so it's-
and I wouldn't worry so much. I mean, I am a pessimist at times, because I'm a snowmobiler, but the activity that happens in my yard where the snowmobile trail goes through. I've
lot of
run
people,
into some
yeah.
issues with some people.
Yes.
So, darn kids, but no, it's adults too.
Yeah, there's-
So that's right. And so that's why, I mean, it's a small percentage, but I guess that's why I'm curious, because of the access at nighttime, on off days, that during the time that the snowmobile trail is operational, people can access that from
the wood side.
the wood side,
Yeah.
because there's, no partition.
Yeah. I mean, we can certainly look at what the expenses of putting the fence around it. I mean, they can be pretty expensive.
Oh,
So
yeah,
it-
yeah, that's why I was curious. I mean, I just wanted it brought to people's attention that there is access 24 hours a day. I can walk into the transfer station anytime I want from my snowmobile trail, so.
Yeah,
Dave being on the snowmobile club,
Well, that's why, one of the reasons I'm here.
yeah,
The snowmobile club is very interested in this on the east side of the transfer station, only because we have a main trail running.
That's
through it,
right.
And it is our
and
main
it
trail.
used to be an ITS trail, but
It's an
it's,
ITS trail, so it's,
Yeah.
we're even getting paid to clear it from the
Yes.
state because it's their trail.
yes,
So I just want to understand, when I go back to the meeting, people are gonna ask me, the trail is still gonna be there?
the trail, and this way, it's not gonna impact a trail, whereas if it was down there, it definitely was gonna impact your clubhouse and your trail.
Well, yeah.
And so I think, for the snowmobile
Yeah, so,
club's
I have to be able to
perspective,
go
This
back
is-
to the state and say that, we're gonna make, if they have to move it, it will get moved.
Yeah,
if
and I don't
there's a
think
fence
it's
or
gonna
whatever.
go that far into the, at all,
think
because
it's-
that's quite a ways into the woods.
No.
It's really not,
Well, I guess
Right on the
it
edge.
feels that way.
yeah. Okay,
So if we cut, would it be in a?
it would be in the cut zone probably.
Right from here to that wall. It's not that far.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I guess we're thinking of, in terms of cutting like, 30 feet, something like that.
So it would definitely go over 30 feet.
It could impact the.
Yeah, it would, but you could, if we still own more. we could just-
Well, and we
Yeah,
have 12 feet we have to worry about too, because we have to be 12 feet from the edge of anything.
But the cutting isn't to accommodate placement of panels, it's just to
No.
accommodate
Accommodate the
size.
sun, shade.
Accommodate shade, and then also if we want to increase the size of the array, then I think that's gonna be important because like what I was envisioning is the property line is almost like this on the edge here.
Yeah.
So it's wider here. So if some of this gets cut back, if this generally stays the same, goes back 30 feet and does the same.
Yeah,
swoop,
and I think you
we
can kind of
gain
make out the snowmobile trail
some Space
right,
there. Right
right
here.
there. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So,
It seems to me like we could figure that out.
Oh, yeah, I think that
yeah.
definitely this is a much easier sell for the snowmobile
Yeah.
situation than it was.
Yeah, as long as their trail isn't threatened of going away, right? That's the main.
Something else you might want to consider is looking at the Monmouth Comprehensive Development Ordinance. It's available on the website. There are buffering, enclosure and visual requirements that were put in a couple of years ago
Okay.
that will affect certain aspects of that
So
project.
like having vegetation buffer or something on the road?
Visual buffer, vegetation buffers. And just because there's no houses directly across from there doesn't mean they don't apply.
Right, okay, good to know, thank you.
Because there's really no exceptions in the buffering or visual sections.
Right. Do you think that would affect like the access road,
No,
just on the main road?
I think on the front, on the main road, I think.
Yeah.
But that's really up to the planning board.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of vegetation on either side, even if you cut it back. So I really don't think it'd be an issue, just on the front.
Okay. That's good, that's good to know. We'll have to read through that so we know what we're looking at there.
And I can't remember, but I think there may be some fencing or access requirements in and then I can't remember now.
Okay.
So have we pretty much exhausted first pass?
I've got one last question, if you're okay with it, Harold. What sort of lead time do you need on construction?
Well, I mean, I would imagine that this project, the soonest we'd be starting this project would be maybe early to, late spring, somewhere in that range. So. And it takes a while, like the utility process takes a while. Typically with an array this size, it can be. If they pass it, then it's quick, it might only be about a month and a half to get that feedback from the utility. If it doesn't pass, that's always that's a increasing concern these days that the utility circuits are getting filled up. And so we've had a lot of projects fail this year where we've spent a lot more time having to kind of battle with the utility to get them to lift some of their requirements and allow the system to move forward. So if it fails, it doesn't mean it's shut down per se. It just means that there's a lot more time involved at that point to figure out why has it failed? What things do we need to put in place to mitigate whatever the, safety and reliability concerns are? And what that's gonna cost, So
And would that require a renegotiation of the contract?
it could, if we found out that, at the transfer station, we've got to bring the wire, 300 plus feet, and they're gonna require, I don't know, an expensive recloser or something that they determine is necessary, then that expense is above and beyond what we can really model up front. Because we just don't know. We don't know that information until they're telling us. Really.
I did a project with CMP many years ago where we were upgrading a transformer pad from 2,500 kVA to 4,000 kVA.
Yeah.
And at the very last minute, they decided they want a 3-phase isolation switch mounted on the pole,
Ah.
which cost an extra, I
No
can't remember, it was
isolation.
$10,000 or $12,000, whatever heck it was. It was a lot of money.
Yeah.
But the other thing I will bring up is, this is on land that belongs to the town. It doesn't belong to the select board.
Right.
I believe we'd have to have a warrant article question in June on it. That would probably be the earliest we could have one, unless we did a special election.
Yeah.
We do not need to vote on this. The voters don't have to vote on this. You're not spending any money. And you have charge of using the town's property, as does the manager. All you're doing is changing the way you get your electricity. You're not incurring an expense until you decide to either.
I think
save
you
money-
better check on that because we had to have a referendum vote to allow third-party usage of the land in the back of the pit. This is third-party usage of town property.
There would be a lease agreement as part of the power purchase agreement. There's a lease agreement as well.
I've not seen that voted on by the public. I've only seen that voted on by the board.
Well, maybe that's a good question for the
Yeah.
town attorney.
Good question.
Yeah, and my experience is different towns, have slightly different rules, and 50% need to bring it to vote and 50% don't, so.
So there's the directive for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you got a 50-50 chance.
With the speed with which technology is moving, and I don't know anything of what's going on with solar, but how long before this becomes an antique?
Yeah, good question. I don't know.
6 months.
Exactly, right?
Excuse me.
No, I mean, it's better than that. I mean, panels, when I started doing this 12 years ago, we were installing panels that were around 200 watts at that time. Now the same size panel is about 330 watts on average. So the efficiency of the panels has increased without a lot of, it's not so much even the efficiency just in the cells, it's more in the efficiency of the manufacturing process and, fitting more cells into empty space to get more power out of the same amount of square footage. Those are where the biggest efficiency gains have occurred. So I imagine, it will become an old system at some point, and there'll be better technology, but it won't be for 10 to 15 years before something becomes to a point where it's, based on my experience so far, nothing has happened next year, within 2 years that has been this giant leap that makes the original investment look bad, I'd say the biggest thing that has occurred that I've seen is when we first started doing this, I think our average price of installation was like around $5 a watt. And now it's like around $2 a watt. So there has been a significant price decrease. And so that, but that has really hit a low point and started to climb again. So compared to 2 years ago, things are costing more now. 2 years ago is like the bottom, and I think, there isn't a lot more. There's incremental savings to occur in all of the equipment, but there's no major gains like the big advancements in manufacturing and things like that have kind of occurred. So as far as I know, as far as I think the market can see, there's no major things coming down the pipeline that will cause, a huge technology leap. So I think again, it's technology, so it will become obsolete compared to new technology. But if the original investment is still, based on the economics of that investment, good, and the equipment, with the warranties that it has now, if that investment plays its lifespan out, you're really not going wrong there.
So this is my final question. Maybe it's the final one for everybody here. I just want to summarize the decision that we're thinking about making or beginning to make. What your company is offering is at no cost to the town for us to save $4,900 a year on our electric bill for a minimum of 6 or 7 years, depending on how you count them.
Yeah.
And maybe as long as 25 or 20 years
Yeah.
with some extensions possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it costs us nothing. And we save $4,900 a year.
Right. And I mean, frankly, and that's really it. I mean, and that's year after year, right? So even if you decide not to buy it, that number just every year. So it's pretty risk-free. I mean, it's really not.
I want to check, and I've already sent an email to the attorney about whether it requires a vote or not, but in your experience with any towns that did require a vote, did you get the contract signed by the board first to get the process going before that vote, pending a vote of the voters? Or did you wait until after the vote of the voters to start the paperwork?
Geez, I think that we waited. Pretty sure that the vote occurred first.
If the vote's required, we're not authorized to sign the contract until the vote happens.
Unless it says pending approval by the voters.
Yeah, I wouldn't sign a contract like that, I would.
Yeah, I mean, I think for like what I've kind of heard from other towns is that it's based on, kind of the town culture to some degree. Does the town feel like it needs to inform, town members that it is going to make this purchase and that, because really the biggest risk, I guess, to the town members is that in that 7th year, if you do go to purchase, there's a capital expenditure there.
Well, there's no doubt at that point, whether they decide that they want to put money in each year, starting from the beginning, that's going to be in a budget article question that requires a vote or approval. Or if they decide that they want to buy it and they're going to borrow the money at the 7th year, that's going to require voter approval.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
we'll see what the attorney says.
Okay.
That'll give us some direction, I guess, on timing.
yeah,
Thank you very much.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Thanks.
And feel free.
Nice job.
Hey, thank you very much. Feel free to ask any questions ongoingly, send an email. We're happy to respond. The other thing is, do you want us to follow up with a contract?
Yep.
To view, because you can
Yes.
get that in front of these.
Doesn't hurt to look at it.
To look
You
at.
know, if there's any red lines, we can look through that.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you, Danny.
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, good to meet you all. Thanks for your
Thank you
time.
very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keith, for
Thank you. Yeah, good to meet you.
being the tour guide.
Mhm.
Have a good day. Thanks.
Laptop.
Danny.
Oh, geez. Forget my whole world there. Your restaurant looks like.
Yep, right straight across there.
We're on to warrant number 8.
Items over $1,000. Bernstein, Sure, Sawyer, and Nelson, our monthly retainer fee, $1,041.66. Blue Rock Earthworks for solid waste trips, $2,225. Eco Maine Recycling, $1,985.01. Fleet Truck and Refrigeration, 2010 International Repairs, $1,822.95. Lance's Auto and Truck Repair, 2013 Workstar Service, $1,738.74. LP Poirier and Son Incorporated for the Beach North Main sidewalks, $48,269.98. Maine Equalization, our assessing contract, $2,287.50. Maine Municipal Employees Health Trust for employee insurance, $19,147.28. Maine Waste to Energy Solid Waste Tipping Fees, $2,412.03. Pease's Screen Printing Company for soccer t-shirts, $1,202. Pine Tree Engineering for engineering services for Monmouth sidewalks, $2,850. Treasurer, State of Maine, one check for $3,037.25, one for $8,415.98 for titles, plates, fees. Treasurer, State of Maine for Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, $2,659.09. And Wright Pierce for engineering work on the Wilson Pond culvert contract, $4,990.32.
I'll make a motion, we approve warrant number 8.
Second.
So the motion by Kent, second by Harold to approve warrant number 8. All those in favor?
Move we adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor?
Looks like it's 10 o'clock.
I know,
Wow, it
it's
does.
been a long couple of days, isn't it?
I wanna go home.
Okay, so you'll be